A little clicker is missing, you guys, so that makes things difficult for me. But I don't think I have mine with me. All right. So today we're going to talk about political parties, not as the Beastie Boys would talk about parties necessarily, but they make a really good point at the beginning. Hey, let's have a nice party. I hope no bad people come. And so my question is, right? At what point is a party made more open, right, to people coming in and changing the direction of the party? So I want you guys to think about that as we go through this. So first of all, parties make democracy work. My husband hates political parties. He's constantly saying to me, political parties are a bad idea. I don't like the fact that we just have Democrats and Republicans. You know, if I had my brothers, I would do this. To which I say, sure, that's nice here. And I say that in kind of a way that makes him really irritated with me, to be fair, right? Kind of in a condescending, yes, but that's the way the world works way. So I'm going to say to you in a non-condescending way, unfortunately, because of the structure that we have a two-party system. If you want other parties, how many of you, whenever you did your eyesight with or your ideology, ended up somewhere other than the two main parties? That's a lot, right? You guys did this in your labs, right? And so that's a lot of you. And so a lot of you are like, hey, I don't feel at home as a Democrat or a Republican. But because of the structure that we have in terms of the laws that we have at the state level and at the federal level, we have a two-party system. It's inevitable, okay? But parties overall are what make democracy work. And they make democracy work because, look, there are approximately 178 of us in here today. How many of you would say that there is a likelihood that we can create laws that would govern us? I think there's a pretty decent likelihood. I think we could do that, right? How many of you think that we could do that without building some coalitions among us? I think that would be much more difficult. And so one of the ways that parties work is, hey, look, we're going to be involved here, and we're going to kind of say, hey, would you support this or would you support that? And so we get something done. Parties make democracy work. E.E. Schachtschneider said, political parties created democracy as we know it, modern democracy, and it's unthinkable save in terms of parties. They often serve as gatekeepers. We talked about this in the media too, right? This idea that we say, hey, look, we're going to have this platform, and so we're going to run people who support this platform, and that's how we know that they fit. Okay? So a lot of times they serve as gatekeepers. We're going to talk about how that is open, more open in the American system than in many other systems. But a party itself, just definition, is a political party is going to present candidates at elections under a common label. Okay? So it's any group that would present candidates at an election under a common label. Whether that is the Greens or the Conservatives or the Libertarians or the Democrats or the Flugelhorns, it doesn't matter. Okay? The key is they have to present candidates at election, and this organization under a common label, and this organization is created for the purpose of winning. The object is to win. All right? And this is important because the other object is to govern. And we find a lot of times in our history that this emphasis on winning means we don't do such a great job of governing. Okay? And so political parties have two dual functions and they don't necessarily go well together. How many of you have been watching the debates in Oklahoma over the last week, I guess? It's been, so 2 of you. What stood out to you about the debates that, there was one last night? Did you watch that one? Okay, for state superintendent. So what stood out to you?
I think in general, when it comes to some of the debates that I've watched, I feel like I've noticed that people are not always that great at actually hearing one another, and sometimes also not at actually answering questions. And it's hard because you can like feel almost the tension on stage when people are having these debates. And so I feel like it's hard because things can get really heated and you don't always hear exactly what you would like to hear from the candidates, I guess.
Okay, so 2 things. One, maybe you're not getting the information you want as a voter out of these. And so if that's not happening, then what is happening? Well, you know, if they're not listening to the questions and they're not listening to each other, what are they doing? You guys have guesses?
It was interesting, Kevin Stitt was really attacking Joy Hoffmeister about this point.
Okay.
She is part of the party, only listening to the party, and then she was doing the exact same back to him, only listening to the party.
Okay, so this idea that, hey, we're not going to listen to each other, and we're going to attack, right? You use the word attack. We're going to attack this person in order to win. This becomes really difficult whenever it comes to making law, right? Because no matter what, whether we agree or not, and I'll tell you in this room, we don't have the same ideologies, but we do have to keep the lights on, right? We have to make sure that classes are delivered, or whatever services are delivered. These are things that we have to do, right? And then when we talk about elections, they also run elections. Parties are the ones who run elections. So when we think about things like the way elections are run in the state of Oklahoma versus the way that they're run in California versus the way that they're run in New York or Texas or Florida or Kansas, these are all different. Because the parties within the state actually run the elections. Whether it be a presidential election or a local election, parties set up the structure. So what do parties do? Well, they mobilize voters. Even though, there's this question of, hey, I don't necessarily affiliate myself with the Democrats or the Republicans. Nonetheless, you use those as cues. I feel more comfortable with the Republican Party. I feel more comfortable with the Democratic Party. And so I'm going to vote in that way if I don't know anything about the candidate, right? Now, if you know something about the candidate, might it change your vote? Okay, give me an example of that. Give me an example. Eric, will give me an example.
Well, I was talking to my grandfather.
I was talking to my grandfather this Monday about who he wants to vote for governor. And he was asking me, and he said, I don't care what blank did, whether they stole millions from the state or anything. I only care about the party.
All right, and so for Eric's grandfather, he does not care if the candidate is corrupt.
Yeah.
He does not care if the candidate is ineffective. He does not care if the candidate is, robbing the people blind. He doesn't care, as long as they're a member of his party. How many of you, when you think about voting, have not necessarily fully where Eric's grandfather is, but you feel that sentiment? How many of you would say you feel that sentiment?
A little bit.
Okay, Eric says a little bit. Anyone else? How many of you say, no, I want to know more about the candidate? Okay, so don't know and you don't really care. Because there were a lot of hands that were not raised. And so I'm guessing that's you, okay? But one of the things that parties do, and certainly in the case of Eric's grandfather, is he knows that whenever he goes about, he's going to vote for that party, not for a person. Represent, they're going to represent, and parties do a much better job of representing non-elites than do interest groups. Eric has his Stop Whaling Now hat today because he is an elitist who has specific interests, right? And interest groups tend to have an elite bias, as was discussed on Monday, and they have this elite bias for a reason. If you're interested in a particular thing and can give money to it for time,
This wasn't a cheap hat.
it cost him like $28.
No, it was like 40
What? 40? He cares about the whales.
for the whales.
So, but this elite bias means that he is going to be someone whose, those interest groups are going to reflect his views, whereas parties are much broader. They really do reflect non-elite views better. Both Democrats and Republicans, and just parties across the board, do this better. In terms of structure, they also provide structure for the mass electorate. And so if, for example, you're going to go vote and you don't know much about the candidate for labor commissioner, but you know you like Democrats, then you're going to do what? Vote Democrat, right? That's what you're going to do. And so you didn't bother to do any investigation there because we knew there was a labor commissioner. As it turns out, there is, right? And so you're just going to say, well, I don't know. I'm going to choose the Democrat, or I'm going to choose the Republican. People, it structures choices. We know generally where these parties lie. It's going to provide accountability. So, for example, in the state of Oklahoma, who has control of the state of Oklahoma right now? Democrats or Republicans? Republicans. The governors are Republicans, lieutenant governors are Republicans. The legislature has a super majority of Republicans. I mean, like, seriously, there's like 7 Democrats in the state legislature. So that tells you, hey, if I like what's going on in Oklahoma, then I should vote for Republicans. And if you say, I don't like the laws that have been coming out over the last several years, then you should vote for, right? And that's an easy accountability. That's an easy accountability. Organize the government. This is one of those things too. There's a Republican caucus and a Democratic caucus at the state level, at the national level. Both of those things. At the local level, to a certain extent, right? Less so. But they also knit together splintered interests. Eric cares about the whales, right? He also cares about a very low tax rate. What else do you care about, Eric? Schools. He believes in funding for higher education.
Yes.
Okay, so these
Good
are
roads.
better roads. These are things that Eric believes in, right? Those things, you know, when we talk about in the party, he's looking for a party that most meets his concept of what would best be the delivery on those issues. They're going to knit together splintered interests, right? The state of Oklahoma, what are some key interests? Agriculture, absolutely. What else?
Hunting and fishing licenses.
Hunting and fishing licenses. How many of you follow the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife on Twitter? Because you should. It's the greatest social media account there is. Okay. What else? Tribal sovereignty, key issue. There's another big one. Oil, right? Okay. Oil and natural gas. And so natural gas even more so. Oklahoma has more natural gas.
Aviation. That's a big one.
Aviation, the military, generally, we have tons and tons of veterans, more veterans per capita than a lot of other places, but also a lot of military bases, right? Yeah. Oh, weather. Weather there is an interest in Oklahoma. That is absolutely true. Okay? So knitting together splintered interests in Oklahoma for a political party might look very different than it does in Nevada. Why? What are interests, what are some interests you think might exist in Nevada?
Mining.
Mining, absolutely. What? Casinos, absolutely. That's a big one. What? Did I hear skiing?
No, it's joking.
Oh,
That's Utah.
yeah. But tourism, absolutely, right? Oklahoma has a big interest in tourism, not so much, right? You know, and so these interests are different interests, okay? And they're bringing those together in such a way as to form a governing coalition and address those interests. So we have some pretty unique political parties in the United States. One thing I want you guys to be aware of is this. There's this big, long-standing talk about American exceptionalism in terms of democracy and so on. Not so much, right? There's not really, if you do comparative study, that big of a difference in the way that we operate our politics, except in a few areas. And this is one of those, okay? This is one of those. In other democracies, in order to be a member of a political party, you pay dues. You pay dues to be a member of that political party, so you're invested. Okay? And so you say, hey, I want to say, and so you're more active too. You don't just say, well, I'm a Democrat, but I don't really care about what they're doing. That's just kind of mostly the way I am. So I'm not going to pay attention to their platform. Or I'm a conservative, so I feel better with the Republicans, but I'm not going to pay attention to their platform. I mean, yeah, there's some things I disagree with, there's some things I agree with, but whatever, right? You're not going to be active because you don't pay money. Whereas in other democracies, you do. In the United States, candidates are going to be selected in primaries that are organized by the states. Candidates are selected in elections. And they're usually going to run because they want to. Or in some cases, and more increasingly, we have a lot of the interest groups that we were talking about, but well-funded people who back local candidates in particular, but also congressional candidates to run for office to get their particular legislation through. Okay, so either self-selected or someone who gets a lot of money from, say, the Koch brothers. Okay. The two major parties have automatic ballot access in every state. Automatic. They don't have to do anything. But if you're a libertarian and you don't win a certain percentage of the vote, then you're not automatically on the ballot next time. The Libertarian Party doesn't automatically get to be there. Instead, they have to do what? They have to go around and get petitions, get people to sign on to give them access to the ballot. And they have to get 100,000 signatures? No. 50,000 signatures. That's a lot. One of the issues with American parties as opposed to parties in other democracies is this. Because of this self-selection, they're incredibly porous. A charismatic person can come in and run for office and change the entire platform of the party. Okay? A charismatic person can come in, gain support, and change the platform of the party. They are not going to be selected by the party to run. They're going to be less qualified than they are in other places. And what do I mean by that? Candidates are less qualified in the United States. What do I mean by qualified? What would you look for in a candidate? Experience, okay? So they don't have experience. It's much more likely, okay? And they don't have experience in government necessarily, but maybe they also just don't have experience generally in kind of the areas that they are representing, okay? So experience is one. What else makes you qualified? I mean, let's see, yeah. Knowledge, all right, so some subject matter knowledge. So when we're talking about knowing something about, for example, tribal sovereignty was brought up as a thing you have to know in Oklahoma. You know, having some knowledge there about what that means, that's important, okay? So experience and knowledge, those are ways that we can look at this. We also kind of see experience as having prior elected office, you know, having some understanding of the way that the government works, right? And so in this class, are you gaining that knowledge, that experience, you know how government works? Ideally, yes. Okay. We have 3 ways to understand American political parties because we are a federal system, okay? So we have party organization, we have party in government, and we have party in the electorate. Okay, so 3 ways. Let's talk about the first one, party organization. We have local level, state level, and national level party organization. State level parties are often very different from federal parties. Someone was talking to me the other day, and I don't remember, but they said, you know, I'm looking at the Oklahoma Democratic Party, and it doesn't look like the National Democratic Party, right? In what ways is the Oklahoma Democratic Party different than the National Democratic Party?
They still have some right.
They still have some right-leaning views. So, for example, give me one thing.
Like a lot of Democrats are still pro Native American tribes.
Okay, so pro-Native American tribes, that's something you're going to see in Oklahoma that you're not necessarily going to see at the national level. Okay, what else? What ways is the Oklahoma Democratic Party different than the National Democratic Party? Yeah. One more time. They're more focused on Oklahoma issues, absolutely. And so, for example, the National Democratic Party is not known for having particularly strong stances about agriculture, right? The Oklahoma Democratic Party is going to be much more in favor of oil and gas drilling continuing, right? And that is the National Democratic Party, okay? And so in terms of our issues, which you guys pointed out, the Oklahoma Democratic Party is like, yeah, oil companies should continue to work. We want that to happen. Why do they want that to happen?
Jobs.
Jobs, absolutely, right? It's good for the economy of Oklahoma, and so the Oklahoma Democratic Party is going to be much more in favor of that than you are going to see at the National Democratic Party level. Okay? At the national level, parties are organized every 4 years. Okay, and it coalesces at a national convention that only happens every 4 years around the presidential election. Okay, and so at that time, they negotiate, people come in, and they create party platforms. The only time that hasn't happened in a very long time was in 2020. The Republican Party did not adopt a new platform. They just said, yeah, what we did last time plus President Trump. And they didn't adopt a new platform. That was very weird. Okay? It was an unusual thing to happen. But parties tend to organize and put together their platform every 4 years at the national level. States do it more often than that. Okay? So we look at party platforms. We have Democrats and Republicans. Democrats are going to be pro-choice or in favor of legalized abortion, whereas Republicans are going to favor an abortion ban. Democrats are going to favor funding public schools in Oklahoma. Republicans are going to favor school vouchers, right? Democrats are going to want to protect Social Security. Republicans at the national level have issued a platform saying they want to privatize Social Security. Democrats want to expand access to healthcare, public access to healthcare. Republicans want to privatize healthcare, restrict back and actually repeal the Affordable Care Act. And then Democrats want firearms to be regulated, whereas Republicans are opposed to the regulation of firearms in the party platform. Okay? And so as you look at these things, you may say, yeah, but there's some other things too. And there are. I just threw up, it was 10 o'clock at night, so you got 5. But you should look yourself. And one of the things you can do is if you look in the workbook, I have a link to those platforms. You should absolutely look them up. So party and government. Party and government. This is a party as it has been elected by the people. So that means, for example, the Democratic Party that we were talking about that's so different in Oklahoma and, Kansas, frankly, and Texas to a certain extent, from the National Party is still the party in government. If they are elected, then the party in government is going to reflect that. Joe Manchin is a Democrat from West Virginia. However, Joe Manchin does not agree with the Democratic Party as a whole. He's part of the party in government. And so as a result, a lot of Democratic parties, I've lost my word. The Democratic Party legislative agenda, there we go, okay. The Democratic Party legislative agenda is somewhat tempered by having to do what? Negotiate with Joe Manchin or Kirsten Sinema. And so they have to negotiate because that's the actual party that's in government. These are the people who are representing the party. The Republican Party is represented nationally by party leaders. Former President Trump is still playing a very active role in the Republican Party. This is really unusual also. It is not typical if a former president has been defeated from office or has just retired from office for them to remain as active. And then Senator McConnell, and he is the minority leader in the Senate. Okay. And the Democratic Party is represented nationally by its leaders, President Biden, and Speaker Pelosi, also Majority Leader Chuck Schumer in the Senate. Okay, so these are going to be the leaders, right, of the Democratic Party at the national level. So the third part of that organization is parties and electorates. So that's you, maybe, possibly. It's me, for sure. It's everyone who identifies with or leans toward a political party. Okay? If you are an independent but you lean toward the Republican Party, then you're a Republican for the purposes of party in the electorate. If you are an independent and lean toward the Democrats, then you are a Democrat in terms of the way that the party is going to view you and include you. Over time, we've had a number of realignments. Eric, will you take roll really quickly? Yes. Eric is going to take roll. Over time, we've had a number of realignments. So I'm going to define a realignment for you. And this is something that I have asked as many questions. Attendance is live. Attendance is live. I've asked this as an essay question before, so pay attention, all right? Since 1860, there have only been two major parties contesting elections in the United States. That's a long time, right? Over 160 years. The majority of our history, Democrats or Republicans. A realignment is when there is a shift in the party platform or a shift in the power between the parties caused by a shift in a particular group or class of voters. Okay? Whenever I talk about a group of voters, who might I refer to? (18 to 29-year-olds). Sure, absolutely. But also college graduates. Okay? That's a class of voters. Give me another group of voters. Women, absolutely. And so therefore also men, right? Who else? Who's a group of voters? Over here. Yeah. Blue collar workers, absolutely. All right. Who else? Minority group. So, and that's going to be different according to each group. So we can talk about Latino members of Latino Americans. I don't know why I'm having trouble with word space. Or Asian Americans, or Black Americans, or when we talk about Asian Americans, that's more difficult. Are we talking about Central Asian or Pacific Asian, right? We can talk about recent immigrants as a group. Okay. What other group? You guys are doing good. This is good. Yeah.
Members of the LGBT plus.
Absolutely. And so members of the LGBTQ plus IA2S. All right. And so, and also if we talk about ethnic groups, that also means white voters, right? Okay. Native American voters. Are Native American voters poised to make a real difference in the Oklahoma election that's coming up? Yes. Why? What's important about this? Yeah.
Kevin Stitt made a lot of Native Americans mad, and so a lot of Native Americans are leaning more towards not voting for Kevin Stitt.
Okay, so Kevin Stitt has made a lot of Native Americans mad. He's talked about taking away sovereignty. He's trying to break contracts that exist, right? And so they're leaning away. And particularly they are leaning away because the 5 civilized tribes, for the first time ever in history, came out and endorsed his opponent.
First time ever for.
First time ever to endorse in that way, the 5 civilized tribes. That's an impact. That's a group of voters that matters in Oklahoma, certainly more than anywhere else. Okay, but this matters. Okay, critical elections, they signal a change, right? A critical election may signal a change in the electorate. Hey, this may be a realignment. We're going to have to look at it and see. Okay, but something happens in that election that is new, all right? And so we have some key realignments. 1800 is a key realignment. Basically, the Federalists disappeared, right? The Federalists have the power, and in 1800, they no longer have the power, okay? And so the anti-Federalists win, they become the Democratic Republicans, and we have kind of a realignment also in 32 with Jackson, 32, yeah. With Jackson,
1832,
18, that's, yeah,
not 19.
1828, sorry. No, 1832, that was right. Okay, so 1832 with Jackson. And the Democrats become different, and so they split out a little bit, but they maintain power. It becomes just the Democrats instead of the Democratic Republicans. The Republican part of it disappears. But in 1860, you have a change. The Whigs, who have been hanging on since the demise of the Federalists, contest. They get together with the Republican Party anti-slavery, right, and contest the Democrats, and there's a shift in power there. 1860 election, and then 1932 is another really big one, right? In 1932, we have what's known as the New Deal realignment, okay? And so this is closer in history, so I'm asking you guys to think about it. Are you ready? Okay. Closer in history. So in 1932, you have voters shifting from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. Who are those groups of voters? Not individuals, groups. Any ideas?
Oh.
Yeah. Unemployed working class people, absolutely. Okay, are going to shift from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. Who else is going to shift? You are a soft talker. Not in 32, not in 32, not quite yet. What else?
Blacks.
What?
Blacks.
Black Americans are going to start to shift to the Democratic Party in 1932, all right? Because why would Black Americans favor the Republican Party up until 1932? The party of Lincoln, the end of slavery, right? And so you see a big shift in 1932 because Roosevelt says, hey, look, what does Roosevelt propose? Fixing the economy. So you also have college educated people shifting to the Democratic Party, intellectuals, elites shifting to the Democratic Party with this idea that, hey, the government can do something to help the economy. That's the whole idea, right? And so you see, it's a massive shift. I like everybody goes. Like there are a few people who are like, well, I've always been a Republican. I will continue to be a Republican. But basically everybody goes, right? 32 and 34 and 36, Roosevelt's incredibly popular. I mean, he gets elected 4 times over 16 years. That's a pretty big deal, okay? We have another realignment that happens, and this is called a secular realignment. It's not a critical election year. It's a secular realignment. From 64 to 94, we see a movement where what was known as the Solid South, for who? Democrats or Republicans? Democrats, right? Democrats were the Solid South. Democrats could always count on the Solid South.
Blue dog Democrats or yellow dog?
Well, it didn't matter at that point, right? In 64, we weren't there yet, right? In 1964, everybody is a Democrat in the South. There is no Republican organization in the South. Okay? That's significant. And then but we start to see in 1964 a movement away in the South from voting for Democratic presidents and only voting for Republican presidents. Why? What happens? Absolutely, it's about race. It comes down to race. And so you see the South voting Republican because they want to preserve the status quo in terms of race. From 1964 to 1994, the Republican Party builds in the South. In the 1980s, it's really Newt Gingrich. He goes around and builds a Republican Party from scratch in the South, and moves the Republican Party in terms of Congress to Republican Party, from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party. So in 1994, you have the contract with America, and Republicans take back the House for the first time since 1932. Right? And that's significant because Eric is talking about blue dog Democrats and yellow dog Democrats. And I would like to talk about those really briefly as well. During this period of time, you have a tremendous amount of blue dog Democrats, right? And a blue dog Democrat is someone who's going to support a social welfare system, right? But is also going to be in favor of morality in schools and is going to favor racial segregation. Okay? That's a blue dog Democrat. So that meant at the national level, that they could work with other Democrats on the social welfare system, right? And expanding that. But in terms of civil rights, there were a lot of blocks by blue dog Democrats. A yellow dog Democrat basically means they will vote for a Democrat even if it's a yellow dog. So like Eric's grandfather, so I don't believe it's a yellow dog Democrat and would be very upset if I accused him of such a thing. He's maybe become a yellow dog Republican.
A red.
A red dog Republican. He's a red dog Republican, okay? And so he would vote for a Republican even if it was a red dog, right?
Coin that,
So-
coin that.
My question for you guys, and I want you guys to think about this kind of goes with that possible essay question, is was there a realignment in 2016? Was there a realignment in 2016? And I want you to go back to thinking about all those groups that you named. Did we see significant shifts in any of those group loyalties in 2016? I mean, maybe, right? I think this is the maybe. All right, so we don't have time to talk about why a two-party system. Maybe if you're lucky, I'll talk about this in the class